ChessFest Academy number 13, where we will go over the opening a little bit as we look at a new opening, the Sicilian, but more importantly we're going to look at some middle game strategy. Now with both opening and middle game strategy, it's far more than we can cover in a couple of short videos. So this is just to give you a taste of it. We can't cover everything. We will play through a 27 move game. That's actually a game between Magnus Carlsen and Colm Daly from 2003. Magnus Carlsen is our current reigning world chess champion. So this is a great game to look at, and it's actually won in the middle game. Carlsen plays the middle game so well that it is over in the middle game. Now we won't be able to analyze every move because again it will just take too long. But you'll want to play through this game a few times and think about, in every case, why does he make this move? Why are they playing these moves? Let's start off with our first move for white, which is e4. And if I don't tell you what piece, it's a pawn, right? So just e4. Now black's response seems a little odd at first. He plays c5. The idea is, if you're going to control the center, well, he's going to give white the actual center here, but he's going to control off-center a little bit. And we'll see a pawn exchange here that makes things more balanced in a moment. White answers with knight f3. And the idea of knight f3 is that he wants to do d4, and so he's setting up the knight to protect that square in advance. Black sees this coming and so plays e6. And we'll see why in a moment. White goes ahead and plays that d4. And black, as you would expect, takes the pawn. So cx d4 is black's third move. White, of course, as you'd probably guess, is going to, that's right, take back with the knight. So now it's an even exchange. So that would be nx d4. Black plays knight c6, and I think you can see why. Threatens the knight there, but not really. Of course, he's not going to go through with that just yet. White takes out his other knight, knight c3, which of course is now also protecting that unprotected pawn. And if you remember our opening strategy, a couple of things we want to do is try to control the center of the board because you need that space for your pieces to move through. Also to develop bishops and knights, and you see these world-class players doing exactly that. You remember, the other thing we want to try to accomplish in the opening is to castle, and that is coming up very soon. Black responds with d6. White moves bishop e3, and if you look at e3, it is a dark square, so it's going to be your dark square bishop. Comes out diagonally to e3. Black answers with knight f6. And again, we see the bishop-knight development, controlling the center. We've only had that one pawn exchange so far. This is not a very bloody game, actually, at all. White plays f4. Again, moving in for that central control. Black bishop e7. So you see e7 as a dark square, so we're talking about your dark square bishop. And if you look at black now, what is he ready to do? That's right, he's ready to castle now. So you see, just moving that bishop out the one square develops him, gets him into the game, getting your bishops and knights out so that you can castle. White moves queen f3. So look at f3, it's that light square, so we're taking the queen on the diagonal. And as promised, we're cruising through here pretty quickly. If you have the power of the pause button, though, if you need to stop and check things out. And we have a great little example of castling here on the next two moves. Black is going to castle kingside, so remember, grab that king first, two squares towards the edge, hop the rook to the other side of the king. That's a kingside castle written 0-0. White, immediately after, plays a queenside castle. So again, grab the king first, and we're going to move towards the edge of the queen side of the board. So 1, 2 squares over with the king. Don't make the mistake and go all the way to mirror the king side castle. It's just 2 squares landing the king on c1. And then the rook hops to the other side of the king, which in this case there is d1. So we see a king side castle and a queen side castle. At this point we are moving into the middle game. We've developed bishops and knights, not all of them. They each have a bishop sitting on the back row there still, but basically bishops and knights are out. They're working on controlling the center, and they both castled. So I could say we are pretty surely in the middle game here. In the middle game, here's what you need to do. You need to defend your king. Obviously, that is crucial. You can't leave your king unprotected and forget about him and let someone come in and mate you. You got to keep an eye on that. So the other thing you need to do that is equally important, and this is a thing I see young players miss out on most often, is you need to formulate a plan of attack. And Jeremy Silman, a great chess player and author, basically he says, look for your fantasy position. What would be great? Boy, if I could do this, that would be fabulous. Just dream up your fantasy position. And then think, okay, how am I going to get there? And even before you start thinking about moves, just how am I going to get that position? How am I going to work towards that mate and keep defense at the same time? What pieces am I going to use? Am I going to go queen side or king side? Make these decisions in the middle game. Otherwise, what you're doing is just pushing pieces. And I'll come over and say, hey, why'd you move that piece there? And you'll say, So you need to have a plan of attack. You need to have an attack going on in the middle game, where we are now. So let's see what attack and defense these guys come up with. So I'm just giving you those 2 pieces of middle game strategy. There is much else, but let's just start with that. You need to defend and you need to attack. And you need to be doing both of those with a plan and doing them deliberately, not just moving pieces around. Black now plays queen c7. So we can guess maybe he's going for a queen side attack. White answers with knight b3. And if you look at b3, that'll answer the question of which knight. Only one of the knights can get to b3. So knight b3. And I'd love to spend the time going over why they make all these moves, but just take too long. So you can go back yourself and ask that question, why does he play this move? Here's a nice one to look at the why of, though. Black plays a6. And a6 is a very common move for black in all sorts of openings and middle games. It prevents that c3 knight from moving to b5, which would be a powerful place for it to be if white wanted to launch a queenside attack. White now plays g4. g4, pushing up those kingside pawns. I think we can safely say black is planning a queenside attack, and white is planning a kingside attack. And why does that make so much sense? Because exactly, that's where your opponent's king is. If you're playing white, you're going after black's king, and he castled kingside. So a kingside attack is pretty logical, and the same goes for the position vice versa. Do you always have to do it that way? No, you could actually, if he castles kingside, you could say, I'm going to launch a queenside attack because I see a weakness there. I might be able to take out that b7 pawn or something. So, so make a decision. Am I going kingside or queenside? After that, we'll go back to black. He plays b5. White now accomplishes something marvelous. It's a passed pawn. He plays g5. g5. So that pawn he just moved out to g4. He pushes again, and this is Carlsen, by the way, playing white. He pushes it to g5. You got a pawn up here, protected pawn, threatening a knight. It's a beautiful thing. Black responds with knight d7. Knight d7. So he's going to take that knight that's being threatened and retreat him back to d7. White now plays h4. You see Carlsen, I've seen look through a couple of games of his, and he's really good with these pawns in the middle game. Some people think, oh, pawns are weak, don't bother, just leave them there. You know, you see how actively he's using his pawns. He's had a bunch of pawn moves here, and he's really using them to start that kingside attack here. Black now plays bishop b7, and if you find b7, you see it's a light square, and so that's going to be your light square bishop, moves out to b7, putting him on that nice long diagonal here. Good place to have a bishop. White now plays g6. I told you Carlsen was moving those pawns. So g6, he's going to disrupt Black's pawn structure that's defending his king with his own pawns, and even at a loss, that's a sacrifice, and it's okay. Black plays knight b4. So find b4, you see where it is. Only one of the knights can get there, the one that's currently on c6. So knight b4 for Black. White now plays a3. He doesn't like that knight there, and so a3 is just to chase that knight away. And sure enough, it works. Black actually just retreats that knight right back to c6 from whence it came. So just move that knight right back to where it was, knight c6 for Black. White now plays bishop h3, find h3, you see it's a light square, and scoot that bishop up there. Now, if you look at the board, here's another little thing that you'd like to do in the middle game, which is connect your rooks. And it happens almost naturally. Once you've developed your bishops and knights in the opening the way you're supposed to, and you get your queen into the game, and you've castled, as you should, your rooks are automatically connected. It just helps them to defend one another, protects you against a back row mate. Just a good idea to have those rooks connected. That way they work together. And if you can get them on open files, the way Carlsen has this d1 rook on that nice open file there, that's pretty sweet too. Black goes ahead and takes the pawn now. So it's hx g6. So that pawn that Carlsen had moved out, Black now takes with his h pawn. Make sure you grab the right one. So hx g6. And Black is up a pawn now in material. Very little bloodshed though, like I said. Not a lot of capturing going on here at all. Carlsen, though, really wants to erode that pawn defense over here. And so he pushes his pawn to h5, another passed pawn here. And by passed pawn, I mean it's past the center of the board. It's a pawn that can be much stronger on offense. And it's also one that is a potential candidate for promotion if you move into an endgame to get that pawn all the way across. Black declines to capture here. You see he could take that h5 pawn, but instead he moves his g pawn up to g5. So instead of going for the capture, he just moves along there. And I do want to point out, if you were thinking, oh, is that an en passant situation? No, it isn't. We won't go into it, but it isn't. White now plays f5. He's doing the same thing that Black just did. Instead of capturing there where he could, he's going to move that pawn. So Carlsen now has two passed pawns. And now here's an interesting move. You would write it as knight c e5, which means it's the knight who is on the c file moves to e5. And you need to write it that way because if you look at e5, you see that both of your knights can get there. So whenever you have a case where either both knights or both rooks could get to the same square, you have to specify which one. So in this case, it's the C knight. So find your knight that's on the C file, Black. And he's going to move to E5. And I'm sure you noticed right away, he's threatening White's queen. So you'll not be surprised to find that move 19 for White is queen G3. Just moves her over there to keep her safe. Black answers with G4. He's going to push that pawn up a little further. You notice it's protected by the knight, threatening the bishop. Not a very strong threat, but there you are, because we have the queen there as well. And so, in fact, Carlsen goes ahead and says, I can do this swap because if we go through with it, I'll be up a pawn. Watch what happens. Carlsen plays bishop, captures G4, BX G4. He takes the pawn. And Black, sure enough, goes for the trap. and it's nx g4, and takes the bishop. And surprisingly, you would expect that white's next move would be the queen takes the knight. But Carlsen is smart, and he's smarter than me. He's looking to win here, not just grab some pieces when he can. And so instead of going for the knight, he's going to leave that for a moment. He's going to play h6 instead. So he plays h6. He really, what does he want to do? He wants to break up that defense. You notice black's queenside attack stalled out, started that queenside attack, and Carlsen has just kept him hopping over here on the king side, and he's been unable to develop his attack any further. And you notice we have these two knights, 3 pawns, and a rook who are playing defense for white. They're there, and they're just ready. And remember that a3 move? That was a defensive move, but that's one of very few defensive moves that white has had to play here. He's been mostly going for the gold, attacking. Instead of giving up this pawn, or taking here and exposing his king on the g file, black instead plays g5, pushes the pawn all the way up and to g5. And now there, that actually was an en passant scenario. Now Carlsen doesn't go for the en passant capture, but I'm sure he saw it. You notice that the g pawn, when he went to g5, passed through g6, which is a square that white's f-pawn is attacking. And so Carlsen's next move could have been fx g6 ep for en passant, you would note there, so as to keep it clear. But he decides that that's not what he wants to do. One quick note again about en passant, sometimes I get questions about it. En passant is something that only happens in this very limited scenario like we just saw, and it only involves pawns. No other piece is involved in an en passant capture. It is a pawn thing. And so instead of going for the en passant capture here, white's 22nd move, he's going to take that knight now, so qx g4. And you notice material's even again. Now black takes his remaining knight and moves him up to e5, which I'm sure you see right away. Threatens that white queen. And you notice, by the way, the g5 pawn is defended by the bishop. So you see that. So as much as white might want to do that, no can do. So instead, he does want to move his queen to a safe square. h5 is a great place to keep the attack going. So white plays queen h5. Black now is going for a pass pawn himself with g4, which moves the pawn out of the bishop's protection, but the knight is there, protecting that pawn. White moves bishop d4, so find d4 over in the center of the board. See, it's a dark square, your dark square bishop. So obviously he's saying, well, if I can dislodge this knight with the bishop-knight exchange, then I can win the pawn and have that queen on a pretty strong checking file there. So that was bishop d4 for white. Black answers with bishop f6. So look at f6, dark square. So dark square bishop moves there. And this is not enough to stop what Carlsen has planned here. So it's bx e5. He goes ahead and he's ready to swap out there. So takes the knight on e5. And just as you'd expect, black captures back with the bishop, which is why he moved the bishop there. He didn't want to capture with that d pawn and have stacked pawns on the e file, which would be a little sloppy. When you have pawns stacked on top of each other, they can be a problem because you can't move that back pawn without moving the front one first. So it's now black's move would be written the same way, bx e5, takes back. And again, if you look, material is balanced, except that Carlsen has taken the bishop pair, and I'm sorry, Carlsen has taken the knight pair and given up his bishops. Now here comes the fun. You remember we said he wanted to dislodge that knight so he could take the pawn. And this is just a simple combination. You say, okay, I want to take this piece, that would be good. It'll set my queen in a good place. What do I have to do? I have to get rid of that knight that's protecting it. Can I do that in an even exchange that's not going to hurt my position or my material? Yes, and so then you go for it. So now he goes ahead, qxg4, takes the pawn, now he's up material, and has a check. The king is forced to h8, and now white's final move is rook d g1, and this, like that knight move we saw earlier, is another case where you have to specify which one. Notice both rooks could move to g1, so to play the game properly when you're looking through the moves, you have to specify which rook. So it's rook d, the one on the d file, who slides over the g1. And at this point, black resigns. And I could explain to you why, but you can just glance at the board and see that he's in trouble. This kingside attack is very strong. So look at what Carlsen did. This is the perfect model game here. Using those pawns to attack, connecting the rooks. He kept black hopping on the defense the whole game and had to play very little defense himself. But when he did need to, he played defense. And so the question for you to figure out is, why did black resign right now? In other words, what was going to happen next? What would white play that would lead to a checkmate? Black sees the checkmate in a few moves here. So what was going to happen next? So figure that out. You know, I really encourage you to watch this video. This is a crucial one here, looking at this game, seeing how the opening moves into the middle game. Your opening strategy melds right into your middle game strategy. Watch this video a few times. Play through this game a few times. And ask yourself on every move, why did this player make this move? Discuss it. Sit down with the partner. And, okay, why did he do this? And sometimes you might not be able to answer that question. You'll ponder, 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 and say, okay, let's come back to that one. And sometimes then you'll play 2 or 3 more moves, and you'll say, oh, that's why he played that, because you'll see what he was going for down the line. So this is a beautiful game here that Carlsen won back in 2003. Well, study it, learn it, live it, love it. We'll see you next time here on ChessFest Academy.